Welcome to this chapter of the St. Andrews Society of Detroit's Oral History Project. This project was the undertaking of the Charles S. Lowe Memorial Library Committee to capture members' recollections of the society. Recorded in January of 2018, these are the memories of Randall Cain, Society past president, and current Highland Game Master of Ceremony.
The only thing I was thinking of was how I got involved. I had bought my first kilt back in about 1981, and several years later, I wore it along with the Prince Charlie coat to a grand opening of an art gallery in Grosse Pointe. There was a social writer there, and they wrote an article on the gala, and also included a picture of me in my kilt. Following that, I got a note from Alex Buchanan, who was a member of St. Andrews, inviting me to apply for membership. And I said, well, of course, why not? And I was initiated back in 1989. And this was back in the old hall, St. Andrews Hall, downtown. And I believe it was on Congress. It's still there. It's a rock and roll venue now. I have some memories of my initiation, which I wouldn't mind seeing the society go back to. There were 4 stations, and you would go to each station, and one of the members of the president, first vice president, second vice president, would read something to you, and you'd have to respond that you agreed with that or what have you. At least it struck me then as being more meaningful. There was more of a ritual to it than what we do now, and I hope to go back to that too. I was down there when we sold the hall, and at that time, I don't think I was an officer or anything, but I made arrangements for Mark Dorn, who was an art preservationist, to come down and remove the Big Burns painting. Someplace I've got some photographs of that. So that was kind of a momentous event, and for at least a couple of years, painting was stored in Gallery 454, which Mark Dorn owned in Grosse Pointe Park. So, in terms of my being involved in the society in positions I may have held, I was chairman of the games, but prior to that, I remember going to the games at historic Fort Wayne. And back in those days, nobody really had a chance to say whether they were going to volunteer or not. Everybody had a duty to perform. My first year, I remember that I had to take tickets at the gate, and I didn't see much of the games that year. But still, it was very enjoyable. In fact, for the last few years that we were at historic Fort Wayne, my father, Randall Cain, sang the national anthems. Well, it was about 1992, and we were looking for perhaps a new venue for the games. So I recommended to the president at that time, Bill Kincaid, that we take a look at the Edsel and Eleanor Ford House in Grosse Pointe Shores. Bill came out and took a look at it and thought it was a marvelous idea. So we moved the games from historic Fort Wayne to the Edsel and Eleanor Ford House. Now, at that time, we had only one food vendor, Aaron Vincent. And so when the games moved from historic Fort Wayne to the Ford House, our attendance went from 3,500 to 7,700 in that first year. Well, of course, nobody is really prepared for that, especially our food vendor. And you couldn't get a vehicle out of the Ford estate, so Aaron ran out of hamburgers and hot dogs and had to leave on foot and go down to Kroger's at Marta Road, bought the store out of all their hamburgers, hot dogs, and buns, borrowed a shopping cart after telling the manager Aaron would bring it back, and here he is going down Lakeshore with this shopping cart just overflowing with hamburgers, hot dogs, and everything. So that turned out to be a good move for us to go to the Ford House. But in the long run, I guess we weren't exactly what they wanted. I think we'd fit in very well today. But when they kind of asked us to leave, they said, all those people walking around are going to kill all the trees. And so that was the reason why we had to leave. And then, of course, we ended up out at Greenmead, and there we've happily been ever since. I think we're probably at the Ford House for maybe 4 years, so maybe it was 96, maybe a little later. Again, with my involvement, I was games chair. I also served as second vice president, first vice president, and as president for 94 through 1996. And I think maybe we're still at the Ford House at that time. So I was president for 2 years. And during my period as president, the shooting took place at Dunblane in Scotland when all those primary school kids were killed, and also a teacher. I didn't even know about it. I got home and my phone is just ringing off the wall and there's messages. The word was out that I was president, so all the news media are trying to get a hold of me to talk about this. And also one call came in from Dick Purton's show asking me if I'd come on the show, which I did, and Dick Purton was instrumental in helping us raise. We raised about $35,000, plus unknown toys for the kids. And I was fortunate, I guess I'll say it that way, as president to take the check over to Scotland. My airfare was paid for by Ford Motor Company. And I was pretty nervous about it. Had to go up to Stirling and meet with the Queen's Lord Lieutenant, Colonel James Sterling of Garden. We're driven in a limousine out to his estate. How do I act? I don't know what to do with a Queen's Lord Lieutenant. Well, the door flies open, and here's this middle-aged man, and he goes, hello, will you have a drink? And that was the start of it. So it worked out very well. Back to that Dick Purton involvement, what worked out after that until he went off the air in 2010, I was a guest on the show every year to promote the Highland Games. It was like Old Home Week. Following that, we had Dick to referee our tug-of-war at the games, and also Big Al came out to assist with that. Following my time as president, I was followed by Florence Stahl, who was the first female president of St. Andrew's Society. So now my involvement is I'm the MC for the games, and I also present the Kirking of the Tartans, which is down at Jefferson Avenue Presbyterian Church. Most of the participants are members of St. Andrew's Society.
For people that are Scottish descent, younger families now, what would be the benefit to them to become involved in the organization?
Well, I think it's nothing wrong with taking pride in your heritage. And I think to be involved with the society, participate in its events and what have you, it certainly can't hurt. And it's better than sitting at home.
Would you say that involvement leads to friendship?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of my dearest friends is out in the lobby here, Peg Dunlop. Our friendship seems to be focused quite a bit on food.
What is the most unique thing that ever happened at a membership meeting?
Probably the most unique thing was this young man had applied for membership. His name is Xavier Hunter. He's black. Xavier said that his ancestors were on a slave ship coming over to the United States, and it was shipwrecked off the coast of Scotland, and his ancestors were taken in by the MacDonald clan. So, of course, I thought Xavier would make a good member, and I went to bat for him. Yeah, there were some people that thought kind of negatively about the idea, but I didn't back down at all. I could be a rather nasty president at times. Last year at the games, Xavier was the drum major of the day for the games. And I think it was last year that we were just walking around and Xavier came up and he just said, I just want to thank you for all you did for me. And gave each other a big hug. And it was a good feeling.
What was it like walking through the doors of the old St. Andrew's Hall?
There was a kind of a sense of awe about it, a sense of great history. Very beautiful building. There was almost like a medieval sense to the building. To me, it wasn't the place where you would turn out to be just rowdy. The building demanded respect. It didn't get much when we rented it out to the rock and roll group. Well, the one thing I was going to mention was when I was president of St. Andrews, we really didn't have a home. We had kind of been adopted by the Commonwealth Club to hold our meetings there. But I also wanted to get the membership out and throw maybe a little bit more fun into things. So we would have dinner outings for our meetings and go to different venues like Sinbad's, and we went to Genetti's Hole in the Wall in Northville and other places like that. Because I was complaining to Peg, too, about what the cost of some of these get-togethers that we have are, like the St. Andrew's Day and the Burns Day and whatever. And I said, you know, Peg, when I was president, I put on a Burns party and only cost $5 a person. And she goes, well, you were president a good 25 years ago. Things have changed. So that's a good point.
This presentation of the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's Oral History Project was produced by Van Rohr for the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's Library Committee under the direction of Dennis Clemens, current chairperson, and Shelby Brown Rohr, current St. Andrew's Society of Detroit's communication director. This project celebrates the 169th year of the St. Andrew's Society of Detroit. Salante.